Hello, everybody. It is approximately 8:30 Eastern Standard Time here in East Tennessee, and it is Monday, August 4th. So a lot going on today. So let's jump right in. So this jumped out at me today. This is from the great E.J. Antoni, Heritage Foundation. The important context here is once again inflation. The huge increase in 21 and 22 was not more stuff being ordered from factories, but just higher prices on roughly the same volume. The level of these orders hasn't changed much in 5.5 years. All right, so if you have watched any of my prior videos, it's been the argument of this channel, myself, is that when you look at GDP, when you look at stock market going up and you look at increased revenues for the companies on these exchanges, okay, that it is not the revenues going up because of increased sales, but rather increased price per unit. Okay, so what that has done over the last 5 years, and according to this chart, you can see going back that it has really leveled out. Okay, and the reason for that, and this is in a dollar denomination, not in orders, right? So what you're really seeing is, okay, you have a little spike here and a couple changes that had to do with the front running of tariffs, Trump getting sworn in, a couple of things like that, but we're going back down to that same line. So if you do these saber-tooth lines and go through it, it's roughly the same over the last 5 years. Okay, what we've done is inflated assets. Okay, so what happened is the market went up, housing prices went up, but yet production has not gone up at all. Okay, and with that inflated assets, you've seen large wealth transference from 80-90% of the population to 10 to 20, maybe even less, maybe more like 5 to 10. Okay, and that's basically what's going on. But the fact of the matter is, inflated assets, the price of units going up, and that does factor into your GDP, so you get this GDP growth. But when you factor inflation and you also factor in population growth, the economy is not growing. Even with the good GDP number I spoke about in my last video at 3%, it's still not. We are still in a net decline. While that's slowed down, but that's the reality of the situation. Okay? So what is always important to a GDP is its domestic purchase parity. And it is in that purchase parity is how you measure the truth of your economy, especially when you measure it against other nations. So, well, there's been some good news in manufacturing. It hasn't been great. And over the last, because we had the spike, the down in the last few months, it's kind of leveling out now, whatever. There's a lot going on because of tariffs and everything that's still with the dust not settling. Okay, we got to see. But the key is we got to get this number up based upon units, not on the cost of that unit. Right, so this one really jumped out at me today when I saw it. So thought I'd share that with you. So let's go moving on. So this has been the big news, okay? It's from Eric Doherty. Breaking, it has just been confirmed that the Texas Democrat lawmakers will not be returning to allow a vote on redistricting by Governor Abbott's 3 p.m. Central Time deadline, 4 p.m. Eastern. They now face removal from office and possible felony charges. So I just would like to, because this is really an ongoing story. So last I checked, so if you don't know what's going on, is that there's redistricting. Abbott called a special session. The Democrats went to Illinois, okay, to not create a quorum as to not vote. Now, I don't think they would have done that if they thought to vote. Now, there are a lot of rhinos in leadership in the House, okay, and got backing from Democrats to get in there. So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in Texas if you don't know that, even though Trump won the state by 14 points. But what you have to understand is that there was enough pressure on the Republicans where they had the votes to do this redistricting. Okay, and again, I brought up before, like with the Democrats, we're going to redistrict. You are. Look at the vote totals average, and I understand it will never equal the average vote, like on the generic ballot or something like that. I get that. But Illinois, Trump lost by 8. It's 14-3. and look at the map. There's one that goes from central Illinois all the way down. There's another one that's pulled out of the southwest Chicago suburbs. It's highly gerrymandered. And even California, where Republicans get 35 to 37% of the vote on the generic ballot, it's, what is it, 50, something to 9. What would be the number? 42 to 9, something like that, or 43 to 9. So, I mean, Texas is just doing, and what Florida and hopefully Missouri follow suit, the same thing that these states are doing to counteract. We're just counteracting them. What we should have done is filed more lawsuits in Illinois and California to prevent those numbers, so there was more actual representation from their states. Okay? But this is the game we're going to have to play. So I'm just peeking to see if there was any news. I know that the Speaker of the House, he said that he would sign the civil arrest warrants. I don't know the legalities and how the system works for the arrest warrants and stuff like that, and whether there's a mechanism because you can kick them out and then now you have a quorum. I don't know the full mechanism of how this works, but we'll be following it, and I'll be posting on my X or Getter just if something comes up on this issue right now. But yes, totally ongoing story. But I love the Democrats. They don't get their way, so they leave the state. I mean, really, is that, for a party that always talks about democracy, they really don't follow it. They follow when they have the votes, right? Oh, our 100 state assemblymen in New York to the Republicans 35, we voted 98 to 2. That's what matters, not the other 35. So they're interested in democracy and their one-party ideological system. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on that story. So moving on. All right. So MAHA. Okay. And I keep focusing on the MAHA because with the poll numbers of certain groups leaving Trump over certain foreign policy decisions and Epstein, besides the good court rulings we've gotten, the good nominees we've gotten, some of these, the rescissions bill, key elements of BBB, and illegal immigration, which is still not going at the rate we need to, although they are hiring more and more ICE agents. There was a hiring event near where I lived. So the MAHA has been the quiet one, right? It's not as juicy, but they're steaming along. So just in, Trump administration banning soda candy from food stamps. The number one purchase by SNAP recipients is sugary drinks. SNAP is a supplemental nutrition program, in caps, from Eric Doherty, so they can afford nutritious food essential to health and well-being. Okay, not only that, but they're changing the guidelines from 453, you think the average American reads the 453 dietary guidelines, to 4 to 6 pages. Like when I was a kid, the food pyramid, 1 page, all set, even though it was wrong, it probably should have been flipped upside down, what we know now. But at least it makes it more simplistic for people to follow. Okay, easier to educate people on, easier to disseminate that information to a populace that absolutely needs this information. So I think that's good. We're winning on the MAHA front. And I'm going to keep saying that because it's again, not the juicy stories, not the exciting stories, but it is key and it is long-term important for healthcare costs in this country, for access to healthcare. If less people are sick because of chronic diseases and other issues due to that, that means there's more spots for people, less waiting, the cost of healthcare drops down, and that is good for the longevity of a successful economic nation. All right. John Solomon, breaking late this afternoon. Breaking, Bondi orders evidence sent to grand jury for Russia collusion hoax report. So she's convening a grand jury on this crap. About time. In conjunction with Tulsi Gabbard's criminal referrals. Okay, and then you all know about a grand jury. Now, people say, is Obama going to get indicted? I don't think so because of the immunity case, but you can go after Brennan, you can go after Clapper, you can go after Comey, okay, some of the people inside, okay, and you can do that. And even if you don't, because a jury can just, what's the old saying? A grand jury can indict a ham sandwich, right? So you get it out there, and then you get to disclosure, and then the information becomes public. And all these documents that the MSNBCs and CNNs are saying that, this is just distraction, this isn't real news, and all that, then the American people of all stripes will be able to see it, not just the stuff we know that you might see in independent media, podcasts, and things like that. So this is good. That's why you even go. You just do it, even if you can't get, like people say, why do you can't bring him in or subpoena him. Well, even with like when Biden DOJ and the referrals, they're like, well, they won't prosecute him because it's Biden's DOJ. Well, but you have the hearings and you get the information. They have to lawyer up. Okay, you make the information public. There are a lot of reasons why someone gets scared and flips, becomes a whistleblower. Then the DOJ is like, oh, well, this is when we have to go. It would look blatantly political if we didn't prosecute on this. So you always go forward in these issues, especially if this is what happened. You don't, sweep it under the rug, okay? That's another good thing about this administration versus what would have been a generic administration. They would not take on the deep state like this. For all its mistakes that's going on some key issues, in general, it's going in the right direction, okay? So I'm glad this is going on. We'll keep an eye on any news about this, any leaks that come out. I'm sure John Solomon will be on it like crazy on this issue. So I recommend following him on this. All right. Now, MTG sours on Republican Party, claims GOP turned its back on America first, right? Well, she's pure America first, right? That's been her position. Okay, she's one of the key issues, not trusting government entities, okay? The deep state, the administrative state, right? The unelected bureaucrats, okay? All right, and that's where we thought transparency by picking people like RFK, not just for his MAHA, but because his relationship to the JFK files that haven't been released yet, and to along with the Epstein files, and then Tulsi Gabbard, who was inside government, knows how the deep state works and has an amazing view and understanding of foreign policy, okay, against the narratives that we are force-fed, like on Foxconns, that the boomer cons still keep buying. Okay, hence her vote to cut the $500 million for Israel. And we know it's against American statutory law to give military aid to a nation with nuclear weapons. Well, they haven't acknowledged it, and Israel is the only one of 3 countries that did not sign the non-proliferation treaty. So they can plausible deniability. Okay, but the whole world knows they have them. And what was the vote? 422 noes and 6 yeses for her amendment. So she's upset with that. She's upset with the Iran bombing, how the Ukraine situation is continuing, okay, and some of the things that have foreign policy implications, okay, not just economic. Now, I'm all about the tariffs for economic reasons, for getting fair trade balances, for getting countries to open up, right? Because I've argued there's not just tariffs against our goods, but it's also non-monetary restrictions, quotas, ridiculous regulations, and things designed to keep American goods out. So I'm in favor of that. What I'm not in favor for is use it for political reasons, because those are 2 different things, and there are ways to do that. So, perfect example. Lord Bebo. Trump starts a trade war with India because they buy Russian oil. I will be substantially raising tariffs. India is not only buying massive amounts of Russian oil, they are then, for much of the oil purchase, selling it on the open market for big profits. They don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. Because of this, I'll be substantially raising the tariff paid by India to the USA. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, so that's true. I will say on this before I go to the next slide, it's not true. India was not thrilled with the initial move for the special military operation, and they understand Russia's concerns, security concerns, but it's not like they've been huge Russia backers, okay? So I just want you to know that if you follow it historically, right? I told you I watched an hour-long interview by a BBC reporter with the foreign minister of India, and it was great, realistic point of view and everything going in. So that being said, this is a statement from the Indian government. India has been targeted by the United States and the European Union for importing oil from Russia after the commencement of the Ukraine conflict. In fact, India began importing from Russia because traditional supplies were diverted to Europe after the outbreak of the conflict, right? Because Europe cut off the gas and they had to, and oil, so Europe needed additional supplies. U.S. went to 105% on our LNG terminals for exports to Europe to fill the gap, and they had to buy more on the international market, making it more difficult for India not to buy Russia. So that's true. The United States at that time actively encouraged such imports by India for strengthening global energy market stability. That is true. So what happened was, and as Europe cut off the gas and oil from, particularly Germany, from Russia, what happened was the Russian oil and gas was being sold to India, then refined, then put on the ships that weren't unsanctioned, and then sold back to Europe. Okay, and I've discussed this on my videos before. There were actually times where they actually moved gas and oil Russia from one tanker to another if it had to be diverted to a different type of refinery, just so it was an unsanctioned ship. And I've discussed this, okay? So, and the only people that were hurt were the businesses, particularly the smaller businesses, and the citizens of these European nations, because the prices went up dramatically. 2, India's imports are meant to ensure predictable and affordable energy costs to the Indian consumer. They are a necessity compelled by global market situation. However, it is revealing that the very nations criticizing India are themselves indulging in trade with Russia. Unlike our case, such trade is not even a vital national compulsion. The European Union in 2024 had a bilateral trade of euros 67.5 billion in goods with Russia. In addition, it had trade in services estimated at euro 17.2 billion in 2023. This is significantly more than India's total trade with Russia that year or subsequently. European imports of LNG in 2024, in fact, reached a record 16.5 million tons, surpassing the last record of 15.21 million tons in 2022. That is true. Europe still buys Russian resources, lumber, uranium, other stuff, which I'll get to even with the United States. Europe-Russia trade includes not just energy, but also fertilizers, mining products, chemicals, iron and steel, and machinery and transport equipment. Where the United States is concerned, it continues to import from Russia uranium hexafluoride for its nuclear industry, palladium for its EV industry, fertilizers, as well as chemicals. In this background, the targeting of India is unjustified and unreasonable. Like any major economy, India will take all necessary measures to safeguard its natural interests and economic security. And it's great, and that's perfectly accurate. Every statement in this statement is true. I've tracked it. And the other thing that people have to understand, I've also done this in one of my videos, the chart of Russian exports is relatively the same. It shifts from east to west. From west to east, okay, since the beginning of the SMO. And their GDP and other sources of income have actually increased, while that income for oil and gas has stayed the same. And that is because the repatriation of funds of fear of sanctions coming back to Russia stimulated some economic growth, plus shifting slightly to a wartime economy. So that's key. And the other thing to go into this sphere being the sphere of an international level is that China and all they're doing, just like the great Mersheimer said that we spent from 92 to 2017, we have, through a policy of engagement with China, we created them and made them stronger. Okay, so what we're doing here, and then the Biden administration pushed Russia towards China. And all we're doing here is pushing India towards them. And we already know the Chinese are whispering in the ears of the South Koreans, the Japanese, and other situations. This is a bad geopolitical move. India is not going to stop, is going to cripple their economy over this. It's absurd. This is a bad move by the Trump administration. Should use diplomacy with other nations, use the tariffs for equal trade, and separate those issues. Just like we shouldn't be using sanctions and a dominance of the international trading system for our political will. All right? So that's it. So speaking of that, we'll move on to a little Ukraine update, since that's what's going on. So on the right, if you don't know, over the weekend, last Friday, Chasiv Yar finally, which I've done updates for a year and a half on, in northern Donetsk, finally fell to the Russians. It's got high ground, overlooking it, and you can see right here by this red arrows on the right, they've actually starting to drive west now towards Kramatorsk region. If you don't know, Slavyansk and Kramatorsk in northern Donetsk are the last two areas. Now, just south of it is Konstantinovka, also in northern Donetsk. The fall of Chasiv Yar allows the cauldron to start going around to the southwest, cutting off Konstantinivka. Then after that, Slavyansk and Kramatorsk is next. And the big thing that everybody's been following is Pokrovsk. And this is the gradual Russian encirclement just over the last week, and this is what the map looks like now. It is completely surrounded. They're entered the middle part of the city, although it's not reflecting in this map just because it's not confirmed and there is fighting, but it's a matter of time. This is getting to a critical mass for Ukraine's armed forces. If you also don't know, Zelensky signed a bill, I believe it was on Friday, basically that they can now 60 plus people can enlist. They're not being conscripted, but they can enlist. You don't put them on the front line, but maybe you can have them do something in the back line, freeing up another soldier to go to the front line. That's usually what happens. Okay, if you start to see 60-year-olds on the battlefield, I know there've been lots of people in their 40s, late 40s, even 50s. So that's that. So basically, what do we got going on? Trump coalition of 2024 is kind of weakening because of younger middle class people, middle working class folks, particularly those that are Hispanic, younger black males who sick of the wars, the middle class vote, that, ancestral Democrat in the Midwest. Okay, that's why I keep bringing up MAHA, because look, a lot of these people are about MAHA too. Okay, it's the Epstein files, it's the war in Iran, it's what's going on, and all the information coming out in Gaza that is not favorable. Okay, you can't contain truth anymore in the world of social media and all this stuff. If you didn't see the interview with Colonel Aguilar, who was just over there in Gaza working for a group that runs the distribution centers in America, you got to listen or watch it on a podcast. It's an hour long. I watched it. It's unbelievable. And it just backed up what I'm seeing from multiple sources. Also, Mersheimer's interview with Tucker is great. It covers Ukraine war and Israel for really in depth, a little bit more than you get on Judging Freedom, although that's more frequent, so you get like updates and opinions on that. So that's going on. So we'll keep an eye on this Texas thing. I'll be tweeting even tonight if I see anything with the legislature. Any other immigration news that comes out, see how the hiring's going with the new ICE agents and so forth. With the new tariffs also thrown on Canada and whatever, see how that affects the markets and everything like that, as well as the geopolitical situation. If you don't know it, basically over some tweets, Trump also deployed, I'm not fully sure if it's a redeployment of 2 or adding additional 2 Ohio-class nuclear submarines near Russia, which again is escalatory. Okay, so let's see where that goes. But we really got to get the rest of this America first, particularly on the foreign policy front, back. Okay? We praise the Trump administration where it's right. Now, I don't know if it's the advisors or the lobbies and the industrial complex and whatever going on behind them, but he seems like his initial instincts are correct, and then he veers off course, and it's hurting his numbers. And that if you lose that capital, that's not good, particularly going in the midterms. We're going to be in good shape with money-wise. Okay? But you got to get this right, all right? And this is going to alter nothing, the Indian sanctions, nothing on the battlefront at all. Russia's 3 conditions will always stay the way it is. And like Mersheimer says, we're going to a frozen conflict. We're going to go to a frozen conflict. That's not where you want to be, particularly if the Trump administration originally wanted to pivot east towards China and containment there. Well, if you're bogged down here and you're creating another enemy and now you're driving India towards that trio, well, right there you have 2 billion people against you and more manufacturing than you and more natural resources with just those 3 countries. What are you doing? So we'll see where that goes. We'll just see if it's an initial threat, And Trump even said it probably wouldn't even work. So why do it? You don't gamble with geopolitics like this. So anyway, that's the last. So I'll be updating on my X at Patriot Planner 1 and my Getter at Patriot Planner. And if you like this video, please like, follow, and share. And hopefully I'll put out another video on Thursday or Friday. All right. Have a great rest of the week.